The woman was merely cleaning up trash when she disturbed her husband on the phone. Unsurprisingly, she was beaten again. Soon, her moans echoed downstairs, but neighbors had long grown accustomed to it and showed no interest in intervening. Yunjin was already 5 months pregnant, yet her husband still demanded she go to work every day. To avoid detection by colleagues, she wore a compression garment, covered in bruises from prolonged domestic violence. Her head now bleeding from her husband's blows, she dared not make a sound. Returning to the living room, Yunjin picked up the wedding photo he'd accidentally shattered during the assault. Suddenly, Miho, seemingly transformed, pulled a gift from his bag and tossed it before her. Yunjin picked it up and asked what it was. Miho snapped back, "Shut up and use it." Then he asked Yunjin what she wanted to eat. Knowing he was concerned about the baby, Yunjin softly said, "Strawberries." He pulled a few bills from his pocket and handed them to her. At the supermarket, she saw the price of strawberries. His money clearly wasn't enough. Yunjin decisively bought a cup of strawberry-flavored ice cream instead. Then she went to the pharmacy to buy band-aids for her wound. But just as she returned home, the downstairs neighbor heard that familiar sound again. Miho learned Yunjin had applied band-aids against his will, so he beat her violently once more. Yunjin struggled to crawl out the door. Because she had secretly installed a hidden camera in the living room, her husband dragged her back into the room. The security guard heard the screams and rushed over to knock on the door. He asked Yunjin why she hadn't called the police, but Yunjin told him to go back, saying, "It's fine, I'm still alive." She asked him not to come again and not to interfere. The security guard, feeling annoyed, warned the abusive man as he left that things would get serious if this continued. But the guard didn't know Miho was standing right beside Yunjin. That night, while her husband slept, Yunjin hid in the bathroom eating ice cream. Recalling the security guard's words, she resolved she couldn't just wait for disaster. She picked up the scarf before her and slowly walked to the mirror. All these years of marriage, she thought, nothing but beatings, not to mention receiving gifts like this. Now, things another woman discarded were being thrown at her. Staring at her reflection, Yunjin couldn't help but feel profound sadness. Then she touched her head, still oozing blood. The scene of the recent assault played vividly in her mind. In that moment, she finally resolved to stop enduring. She immediately grabbed the phone beside her. Yunjin sent photos of her bruised and battered body to her colleague Mina. She asked Mina if these could be used as evidence. In truth, besides these photos, last night's domestic violence had also been captured by the home security cameras. Perhaps she had deliberately crawled outside the door to ensure the cameras recorded the scene. But for some reason, she hadn't sent the video to Mina. The next day, Mina sighed repeatedly as she looked at the photos. As someone who'd been through divorce, she offered to connect Yunjin with the lawyer who'd helped her. But regardless of whether the photos could be used as evidence, she feared Yunjin wouldn't last until that day. Afterward, Yunjin forced herself to go to work. Yet before quitting time, her husband called, demanding she come home. Yunjin immediately started walking while ripping off her restraints. The moment she changed her outfit and appeared downstairs, her husband's impatient voice came from nearby. Yunjin activated the recording function on her phone again. Amidst her husband's constant grumbling, she got into the car and nonchalantly placed her phone aside. Only then did she finally breathe a sigh of relief and offer her apologies to her husband. On the way, Yunjin couldn't help but sneeze, earning a look of disgust from her husband. As she reached for a tissue, she accidentally knocked over the storage box. While frantically tidying things up, a woman's phone case caught her eye. Miho, upon seeing it, immediately grew tense and nearly caused an accident. He once again vented his anger at Yunjin. Yunjin looked up to realize the navigation wasn't heading toward her parents' home, but an unfamiliar location. She asked her husband where they were, but he only gestured toward the luggage in the back seat. Yunjin didn't understand his meaning, only feeling a sense of foreboding. Later, Miho's car drove off toward that strange place. Somehow, Yunjin found herself back at her parents' home. The scars on her back seemed to have fresh wounds. After bathing, she slowly lay down beside her mother. At that moment, she finally couldn't hold back and began to sob. Her mother heard the sound but showed no reaction. When Yunjin woke up the next day, her mother was gone. As she stared blankly at the silk scarf, the doorbell rang. It was her sister-in-law, who had returned with her mother. In truth, Her mother had long been suffering from Alzheimer's, and between her and her mother, there seemed to be some unresolved emotional knot, and so Yun-jin left her mother's home just before departing. Her sister-in-law mentioned she'd forgotten something. Seeing the expensive silk scarf, Hyran assumed Yun-jin had met a good man and felt envious. At that moment, Yun-jin received a mysterious phone call. The scene shifted to a woman named Juran cleaning her home, yet the foul stench wafting from the yard deeply troubled her. That odor felt unmistakably like the putrefaction of a corpse. Juran and her husband Jae-ho had moved into this large house just 3 months prior, but an eerie atmosphere constantly permeated the vast space. That day, she heard constant clattering sounds coming from the second floor, summoning her courage. She approached the room. The moment the door opened, memories flooded back. She had gone to her sister's apartment, only to be met by a pungent stench upon entering. What followed was a scene she would never forget. Ever since, Juran had suffered from depression. That smell was forever etched into her mind. That day, she took her medication to manage her condition as usual. Unexpectedly, a pungent odor wafted in. It made her immediately spit out the pills she had swallowed. At first, she thought the water she drank might be the problem. Then a gust of wind blew, and she realized the smell was coming from the yard. Looking at the scene before her, she suspected something might be buried underground. She resolved to dig and investigate. But just then, her husband and son returned. Jae-ho had walked around the area and told his wife he detected no odor. Juran then asked her son if he smelled anything. Hearing him say he didn't smell anything either, she dropped the matter. Later, Jae-ho told his wife the smell in the yard was likely from the natural fertilizer. "And you were the one who asked me to buy that fertilizer," he added. Juran listened, but the memory didn't register. Her son then left, seeming preoccupied. Jae-ho merely remarked that he was entering adolescence. After dinner, the new neighbor across the street suddenly visited, but Jae-ho glanced at his wife and immediately refused the woman's invitation. He seemed unwilling for his wife to socialize with others. Before leaving, the woman uttered a remark that caught Juran's attention. Hearing it, she realized her earlier sensations might not have been illusions. Just then, Jae-ho abruptly ended the video call. Later, he asked his wife if she could still smell the odor, and if she still heard the clattering sounds from upstairs she mentioned 2 days prior. Juran denied both. Jae-ho then suggested her heightened sensitivity stemmed from the anniversary of her sister's death. Yun-jin, moved by her husband's tender words, listened quietly. Unbeknownst to her, the happy family she believed in was already approaching a cruel truth. The next day, Juran cleaned as usual, only to find a plastic flower in the flower bed. She casually tucked it into her pocket, but an unidentified substance remained on the pebble, unnoticed. When a gust of wind blew, that pungent smell hit her again. Recalling the female neighbor mentioning an odor the night before, she finally decided to investigate. What followed, however, left her frozen in terror. Before Juran could recover, the doorbell rang. She hurriedly covered the flower bed with a jar, but when she opened the door, Miho stood before her. That very night Yun-jin was abused. Miho had called Jae-ho, and Yun-jin had overheard their entire conversation. But Jae-ho never showed up for their meeting, so Miho took the opportunity of accompanying his wife back to her parents' home to pay a visit. He handed Juran a business card, claiming it was for her husband. Meanwhile, Yun-jin in the car noticed Juran's scarf. Their designs appeared identical. A sense of unease washed over Yun-jin. Immediately, she recalled the scene from earlier on the road. Meanwhile, Miho had already barged into Juran's home. Seeing Miho had left, Yun-jin hesitated before opening the box once more. It wasn't a phone case at all, it was a phone. Just as she was about to unlock it, a dog suddenly appeared at the car window. Startled by this unexpected sight, she dropped the phone into a crevice. Meanwhile, Miho had already begun imagining himself as the master of the yard, but then he caught a whiff of that pungent smell. Juran quickly explained it was the scent of natural fertilizer, yet Miho insisted on following the scent. Seeing this, Juran immediately shouted to stop him. She insisted she couldn't accept such things without her husband's permission and asked Miho to take it back. Hearing this, Miho slowly walked toward her. Juran said she needed to call her husband and asked him to wait there. But while Juran was on the phone with her husband, Miho vanished. Terrified, Juran rushed outside. She feared Miho might discover the secret in the yard, but when she reached the backyard, Miho was nowhere to be seen, and the jar showed no signs of being touched. She returned to the room only to spot a figure. Juran immediately approached the shadow. Miho, holding his phone, snapped several photos of her. He instructed Juran to remind Jeho not to forget about fishing at the reservoir. Juran remained terrified by the events in the yard. Jeho returned home from work and finally learned what had happened that day. Seeing the scene before her, Juran felt her breath catch. She retreated inside to continue taking her medication. Meanwhile, Jeho finally opened the jar. Inside lay a human finger. After digging vigorously a few times, he approached Juran with a grave expression. This scene nearly scared Juran to death, yet he claimed it was a joke. Gesturing for her to look at the object on the table, he explained that the property manager had mentioned workers had buried trash there during construction. Over time, it might emit an odor, but hearing her husband's casual tone, Juran refused to believe that was what lay buried. She was certain she had seen a human finger, and she recognized that smell. It was the same scent that had surrounded her sister when she died. As she moved to investigate herself, her husband suddenly embraced her. Jeho insisted, "There's no human finger in our backyard." Hearing this, Juran plunged back into deep self-blame. Meanwhile, Miho sent Jeho another threatening text message. When Yunjin returned from buying gifts, she witnessed her husband gesticulating wildly. That evening, Jeho combed Juran's hair as usual, but the seemingly attentive man secretly slipped sleeping pills into his wife's drink. He intended for her to sleep soundly while he handled everything. Unexpectedly, a thunderclap in the middle of the night startled Juran awake. The rain outside grew heavier, and Juran was now wide awake. She tossed the scarf Miho had touched that morning straight into the trash. The next day, Yunjin received news of Miho's death. She immediately rushed to a restaurant and ate heartily. It was the most delicious meal Yunjin had eaten since her marriage. Finally, she could be herself without fear or restraint. Those days of beatings would never return. Just as Yunjin was savoring her meal, her husband's younger brother unexpectedly called. He blurted out a string of incomprehensible words before declaring he wanted to cut ties with his brother. But Yunjin replied, "No need to bother. We're already estranged." Inwo thought his brother was cutting ties with him. Instead, Yunjin said, "Your brother is dead." Before Inwo could react, Yunjin hurriedly hung up. On such a good day, she just wanted to enjoy her meal. After Yunjin returned home, well-fed and content, she learned about Inwo's phone call. It turned out Inwo had sent over all his brother's messy belongings. Yunjin also discovered a suspicious ledger among Miho's possessions. Soon, Jeho was investigated as a suspect. Actually, during Yunjin's earlier questioning, she had already mentioned Miho's planned meeting with Jeho, but at the time, she wasn't sure if she'd lied. Her hands kept fidgeting nervously. Juran couldn't help recalling her husband's words from that morning. As she prepared to leave, she discovered the rain was pouring down heavily. Jeho claimed he hadn't gone out night fishing. Yet Juran, who had woken in the middle of the night, hadn't found him beside her. Moreover, when she left that morning, she noticed her husband's shoes were covered in mud. Even the car had fallen leaves on it, and the tires seemed coated in dirt. The sheer weight of her husband's oddities made Juran feel dizzy, and she fainted instantly. When she awoke, she found the female neighbor from earlier in her home. It turned out the woman and her son had carried her back. As the neighbor chattered away with familiar ease, Juran remained silent. Only when the neighbor brought up the matter in the yard again did she react. Yunjin was suddenly informed by her landlord that she hadn't paid rent in 2 months. She was puzzled. Wasn't she renting the entire house? Why would she still owe rent? Only then did she learn from the landlord that her husband had long since withdrawn the deposit and switched to a monthly rental plan. Yet she remained completely unaware of all this. She didn't know what else her husband was hiding from her. Soon, the day of Miho's funeral arrived. Yunjin turned on that old phone again. Unexpectedly, a call came in. The moment she powered it up, Yunjin had no idea what the caller meant. Startled, she quickly hung up, but the next second, she discovered an explicit video in the photo album, and among the phone's photos was a family portrait of Juran's family. Only then did Yunjin grasp the meaning behind her husband's words in the car that day. She immediately pulled out her own phone to search for information on Jeho. When she saw that the man in both photos was the same person, a bold thought struck her. At the funeral, Inwo came to pay his respects. Yunjin calmly ate an orange as if nothing were wrong, until Inwo revealed her late brother owed a staggering 200 million won debt. Then her composure shattered. Yunjin was utterly dumbfounded. Seeing the 300,000 won red envelope Inwo tossed aside, she finally erupted. Yunjin couldn't hold back her accusations against the Inwo family. Even if your late brother was an orphan, your family had no choice but to take in. So you felt no real bond. But when you had nothing, you married a pharmacist. Your brother even covered your Hawaii honeymoon to save face for you. We booked the restaurant for your father's 70th birthday banquet. We paid for your mother's surgery and hospital bills too. Giving us a measly 300,000 won now? That's treating us like complete strangers. Inwo thought his parents would be heartbroken if they heard this. Yunjin retorted that if they truly cared, they should have come themselves. All those years raising him, they neglected him and beat him. At that moment, she shed tears for her deceased husband, though perhaps more for her own sorrow. Her dazed mother, witnessing this, brought Yunjin a pillow. She remarked, "After all, he was your husband. You must feel some sympathy for him." Yunjin didn't deny it, replying that sometimes she did feel sorry for him just like she felt sorry for herself. Later, Juran and her husband came to pay their respects, unexpectedly encountering Yunjin in the restroom. The moment Yunjin saw the woman before her, she instantly recognized her as Jaeho's wife. She immediately greeted Juran and handed her a tissue. This series of actions left Juran somewhat bewildered. Just then, Juran noticed Yunjin's phone. Seeing the phone case, a wave of dread washed over her, because that night, the photo she'd seen on her husband's phone had featured this exact phone case. After leaving the restroom, Yunjin immediately sought out Jaeho, demanding to speak with him alone. Before walking away, she shot Juran a contemptuous glance. Yunjin pulled out that familiar phone to threaten Jaeho. She declared she didn't know the truth yet, but she would uncover it herself. Jaeho, however, urged her to consider the child in her womb, and not make the same mistake Miho did. Juran witnessed their entire exchange. As she prepared to leave, she unexpectedly collided with Yunjin's senile mother. The woman rambled incoherently about having a son in Seoul and expressed her wish for Juran to become her daughter-in-law. Juran accidentally pushed Yunjin's mother to the ground. As she bent to help the elderly woman, Yunjin approached. Juran was bewildered by Yunjin's intense hostility toward her. She hastily apologized to Yunjin. Yunjin retorted, "Your husband killed mine." Jaeho immediately shielded his wife and escorted her away. Just then, Yunjin received a call from the police. She learned her husband had been charged with threats and intimidation before his death. She'd believed killing him would bring peace. In that moment, Yunjin completely lost her mind. The next instant, she discovered her husband had purchased 5 life insurance policies. Yunjin rushed to the insurance company to inquire. The combined coverage of the 5 policies amounted to a staggering 500 million won. However, the salesperson informed her that if Miho's death was deemed an extreme death, the claim would be denied. Yet Yunjin firmly replied, Miho didn't commit suicide. Later, she went alone to the rooftop, gnawing on an apple. Then she recalled that night scene. Miho lay quietly beside her, unaware if his breath had already ceased. Yunjin then got out of the passenger seat and walked around to the driver's side, her expression filled with terror as she started the car and drove toward the reservoir. Suddenly, she saw a happy family of 3 below. As the woman turned away, tears welled up in Yunjin's eyes. Her husband's words echoed in her mind once more. Why must you be the one to punish them? Actually, even before Miho's death, Yunjin had discovered his pile of strange items. When she questioned him, Miho claimed they were things obtained through karma. She asked if these were stolen. Miho insisted they weren't stolen, but that he was merely punishing them. He told Yunjin that in their country, crossing just one small line could lead to a comfortable life. So why was their home still so shabby? Because those bastards clung desperately to that last step, blocking us from crossing over. That's why he swore to punish them. But Yunjin couldn't help asking, why were you the one to punish them? That's when Miho uttered those words, because I have the right. So that night, she sent a threatening text to Jaeho. Now Yunjin resolved to punish those people once more. If not for them, perhaps she too could have had such a happy family. After learning her husband killed Miho, Juran lived in constant dread. One night, she checked her husband's dashcam footage. Unexpectedly, he caught her red-handed. Left with no choice, she lied, claiming she'd left an earring in the car. Jae-ho didn't suspect a thing and helped his wife search. He suggested it was too dark to see clearly and they should search again tomorrow. Joran had no choice but to agree. Later, she approached the female neighbor to request access to their surveillance footage. Faced with the neighbor's persistent questioning, Joran ultimately backed down. That night, however, the neighbor spotted footage of Jae-ho leaving the house. She wondered where he was rushing to in such heavy rain. At that moment, Jae-ho realized his wife's earrings weren't actually lost. Recalling his wife's suspicious behavior the previous night, he secretly took one of the earrings. Jae-ho even warned his wife to stay away from the new female neighbor. Claiming everyone was gossiping that she had killed her own husband, Joran couldn't help but want to know the truth. She asked her husband if he had actually gone out that day. Unexpectedly, her husband cut her off abruptly. Jae-ho then retrieved the earring he'd prepared earlier from the car. The moment Joran saw it, fear flashed across her face as she looked at her husband. She admitted she hadn't lost the earring at all. Jae-ho told his wife that she had indeed lost it and that he had found it for her, but Joran insisted she hadn't lost it. That morning, she had woken to find her husband gone, with clear signs he'd left the house. She pleaded with him to tell the truth, promising as his wife she'd support him. Instead of confessing, Jae-ho flew into a rage. To shift suspicion away from himself, he brought up their suicidal son. Worse, he blamed all their son's issues on Joran's depression. That evening, as Joran prepared to take her medication, her husband's words resurfaced in her mind. This reminded her of an incident from the past. It was actually on the very day her sister died. Joran had seen a strange man, and while her sister was being rushed to the hospital, Joran spotted that man again. From that moment on, the man's face became deeply etched in Joran's memory. Little did she know that years later, he would become her son's teacher. Joran was so terrified by the sight of that familiar face that she dropped her spoon. From that moment on, she seemed like a different person. She began forbidding her son from going to the summer camp because deep down, she believed that teacher was a bad person. Faced with Joran's increasingly bizarre behavior, her son couldn't take it anymore. When Jae-ho came home from work, he witnessed the mother and son arguing. He knew Joran must be troubled by that teacher again. Jae-ho reassured his wife that the man was merely a former neighbor, but Joran felt her husband doubted her instincts. Whenever she saw that man near her son, she felt uneasy. No matter how she protested, her son regarded her as if she were ill. The next day, Jack still ignored his mother and prepared to go to Hyeonjeong. The moment father and son left, Joran was overcome with dread. She dashed out, not even bothering to put her shoes on properly. Joran rushed to her son's campsite. Seeing all the masked classmates only intensified her fear. Then she suddenly spotted teacher Kim in the distance. Believing her son was being harmed, Joran grabbed a stick and swung it at teacher Kim, but the student beside teacher Kim wasn't her son. It was the family who had moved into their current house after this incident. The realization drained Joran of any desire to take her medication. She sought out her female neighbor again, demanding to see the surveillance footage. This time, the neighbor offered the video without hesitation. The recording clearly showed her husband leaving the house. This confirmed that everything he had told her before was a lie. The next day, Joran confronted Yeonjin, determined to uncover the truth. She demanded to know the meaning behind Yeonjin's words spoken at the funeral. Yeonjin gestured for her to come in and sit while changing clothes. The moment Joran entered, she spotted an identical scarf on the table. Yeonjin met her gaze but offered no explanation. After opening the fridge, Joran found it utterly devoid of anything suitable for entertaining guests. She helped herself to the leftover ice cream from earlier. Joran asked, "Was it you who texted my husband that night?" Yeonjin didn't hesitate and admitted it outright. Joran was puzzled how Yeonjin could have known her husband, but Yeonjin explained she didn't actually know him personally. Her purpose was to investigate something. Joran demanded a clear explanation. Yeonjin countered, "Are you sure you can handle what I'm about to tell you?" Then she handed Joran the video to watch. As Joran watched the footage, Yeonjin couldn't help but recall the ledger her husband kept before his death. Its pages were filled with secret entries detailing wealthy individuals involved in questionable transactions. Among them was Joran's husband, Jae-ho. The ledger even recorded a demand for 5 billion won. By then, Duran had finished watching the video and photos. Yunjin asked, "Can you tell what this girl does?" Duran just stared blankly at the photos, saying nothing. Yunjin continued, "This phone was stolen from your husband by my late husband," Duran explained. "Though I don't know why my husband had this child's phone. It must all be a misunderstanding. I trust my husband." But before Duran could finish, Yunjin cut her off. "What Duran's husband was doing doesn't concern me," she said. "But what my husband was up to every day, I know it all too well." She suspected Duran's husband must have been threatened. Duran firmly refused to believe her husband could kill someone. She insisted her husband hadn't gone to the reservoir that night, but Yunjin stubbornly insisted she was lying. She said if Duran didn't believe her, she should go ask Jae-ho herself. Just as the two were at an impasse, Jae-ho called. He asked Yunjin to set a time and place for them to meet. Unbeknownst to him, Duran overheard the entire conversation. Yunjin expressed a desire to meet the girl from the video. She wanted to know just how much could fit inside that fishing bag. Duran insisted on accompanying her. That evening, Yunjin sent Jae-ho a text message. They agreed to meet at the cafe at 7 the following night. Duran acted as if nothing had happened, asking her husband to brush her hair. Taking this chance, she apologized to him and promised to change for the better. Jae-ho also admitted he shouldn't have raised his voice at her that day. In truth, this was all part of Duran's calculated scheme. The next morning, as soon as her husband left, Duran borrowed a car from her female neighbor. She then appeared at Yunjin's apartment complex. Today was the day they were to meet the girl from the video. The moment Yunjin saw Duran's outfit, she couldn't help but tease her. Yunjin's words weren't entirely without merit, because Duran soon got a taste of her own medicine. Upon arriving at the girl's house, Yunjin told Duran to wait outside while she went in alone. And so, Yunjin walked in by herself, her large belly clearly visible. Duran stayed upstairs, silently observing. Yunjin met the girl's father posing as a teacher. She lied that Sumin had been skipping too many classes, hoping to see if Sumin was home. But Sumin's father said he'd been busy with work and hadn't seen his daughter in about 3 months. Then he recalled that about a month ago, someone claiming to be a teacher had also visited him, but that person was clearly a man. Yunjin immediately grew fearful. Panicked, she tried to leave. Sumin's father spoke in the same tone as her husband. This instantly triggered Yunjin's nerves. The steaming food on the table also reminded her of the night she was abused. Her home had served similar meals back then. Terrifying memories flooded back, sending Yunjin into a frenzy. After smashing the wine bottle, Duran outside the back door heard the noise, but she found the front door completely locked. With no other option, she climbed over the wall. Inside, Yunjin was still raving. The successive shocks left the man stunned. Duran quickly handed Yunjin her shoes to put on. Then she led the terrified woman away from the scene. Only Sumin's father remained, still roaring. Afterward, Duran asked Yunjin with concern if she was okay, but Yunjin remained silent, lost in her own thoughts. Just then, Duran received a text from her husband. He informed her there was an evening clinic and he'd be home late. Duran knew exactly what her husband intended to do tonight. Faced with her husband's repeated lies, Duran felt a profound sense of helplessness. After this incident, she and Yunjin learned each other's names. Come evening, Jae-ho arrived as promised. Yunjin had been waiting there for some time. He cut straight to the point, asking how much money Yunjin wanted. To his surprise, Yunjin demanded 500 million won. Jae-ho's expression darkened instantly. He had warned Yunjin before. Miho died precisely because he kept making the wrong decisions. Yunjin immediately retorted, "Did you kill my husband?" Jae-ho replied, "If you truly believed I murdered your husband, would you be looking at me like this?" In any case, he instructed Yunjin to produce the evidence first. Yunjin merely smiled before tossing the contents onto the table. Inside the document folder were precisely the items recorded in Miho's ledger. Scanning the materials, Jae-ho couldn't help but ask, "You dare demand 500 million won for just this?" Yunjin then pulled out the photo and asked Jae-ho if he recognized it. Knowing he was cornered, Jae-ho immediately asked if 3 billion won would suffice. Unbeknownst to him, Duran had overheard their entire conversation on the phone. Jae-ho demanded to know why Yunjin had killed her husband. At this, both Duran and Yunjin froze in shock. Yunjin panicked internally. "No! After a long pause, she finally said, "You're practically accusing me of being the murderer now." Jae-ho suggested they go to the police station together and hand over the phone to the authorities. Otherwise, the strange misunderstandings would only multiply, exhausting both of them. But Yeon-jin countered, "If all this is just my misunderstanding, then why would you pay 300 million won for a mere photograph?" Jae-ho countered, "That's a long story. It's simpler to just cover it up." "But clearly, you've already refused." To his surprise, Yeon-jin declared, "That long story? I intend to investigate it thoroughly." Seeing Yeon-jin's resolute stance, Jae-ho couldn't help but warn her again, "Don't end up like your husband, prying into things and getting hurt in the process." Later, Yeon-jin met Juran again. Seeing the woman like this, Yeon-jin felt utterly annoyed. She urged Juran, "Spit it out. Say what you need to say. Don't waste my time." Juran asked, "Do you really believe my husband is the murderer?" "Not yet," Yeon-jin began, but the phone rang again. After hanging up, a message from the man arrived. Yeon-jin then arranged to meet Juran at a motel the next day. The two parted ways. When Yeon-jin returned home, the landlady was showing people around the house. Yeon-jin calmly ate cucumbers. The landlady kept praising the excellent feng shui of the place, claiming all previous tenants had moved to better locations. Hearing this, the woman asked Yeon-jin where she planned to move. Yeon-jin replied she was being evicted. The woman instantly lost all desire to stay. Yeon-jin then recalled Juran's words from the car earlier. She asked the landlady if 300 million won could buy a small apartment. The landlady dismissed it as a joke. She then asked if 500 million won would be possible. Yeon-jin seemed determined to secure that amount. Back home, Juran's mind was filled with Yeon-jin and her husband's words. For a moment, she didn't know whom to believe. Meanwhile, Jae-ho, drowning his sorrows at a bar, recalled the crime. He couldn't remember how he ended up killing Sumin. He then dragged her body to the bedroom and hid it in the wardrobe. Later, on a rainy night, he buried Sumin's body in the yard of their new home. Originally, Juran and Yeon-jin had planned to find a man named Young-sik. Under the influence of money, Young-sik revealed that Jae-ho and Sumin were actually unrelated. He had intended to cultivate Jae-ho as a VIP client, so he had Sumin act out a scenario. As Jae-ho prepared to drive away, Sumin unexpectedly appeared. She tried to get him to give her a lift. Jae-ho didn't fall for it, and that's how the photo came to be. But after Jae-ho left, Sumin remained in a daze for a long time. As for why Sumin later vanished, he had no clue. Juran confronted Yeon-jin, demanding why she'd said those things at the funeral that led to her misunderstanding. Unexpectedly, Yeon-jin retorted, "Are you saying I made you suspect your husband?" She accused Juran of being so distrustful of Jae-ho. Juran slapped her across the face. The fragile friendship they just built shattered in that moment. Later, walking alone, Yeon-jin was suddenly struck by excruciating abdominal pain. In that moment, she recalled the events of the day she killed her husband. Before leaving, she had slipped sleeping pills into the drink her husband always consumed. This explained the earlier scene in the car. Watching Miho slumber, Yeon-jin conceived a bold plan. She moved to the driver's seat and steered the car toward the reservoir, and pushed both the vehicle and its occupant into the water. To ensure her own survival, she believed her husband must die. After completing these acts, heavy rain began to pour from the sky. Stumbling and falling, she made her way to her parents' home, muttering all the while that her husband deserved to die. When she awoke, she found herself in the hospital. Juran, consumed by guilt, called her husband. She learned he'd be late home due to a TV interview. In truth, Jae-ho hadn't gone to work but to his father's house. It seemed this courtyard held its own hidden secrets. That evening, Juran showed her husband the surveillance footage and confessed her misunderstanding. Jae-ho explained his father had been calling him to come home because his mother's health had been poor lately, but he'd been too busy. That night, he'd actually intended to go fishing but felt inexplicably guilty, so he'd stepped out briefly before turning back. Juran asked why he hadn't told her sooner instead of lying. She should have known about his mother-in-law's condition, but Jae-ho said she was pretending not to understand. Whenever this time of year came around, she became unusually sensitive, so everyone in the household had to walk on eggshells around her. He even produced Juran's antidepressants as proof. Juran resolved to forget the incident, but unbeknownst to them, Their son had overheard the entire conversation. Earlier during dinner, Jack had remarked that his mother was too fragile. Angered by this, he stormed out and was spotted by the female neighbor. Later, Jack visited the neighbor's home. He asked her, "Do all children eventually become like their parents?" At that moment, it was unclear what Jack truly meant by this question. The next day, Juran cleaned while listening to music again. What followed reignited her suspicions about her husband. She remembered finding this small flower during a previous cleanup. It was identical to the one on Suman's phone case. She rushed back to the yard to dig it up. Unexpectedly, her husband appeared again. Juran couldn't understand why her husband kept dragging their son into this. Under Juran's persistent questioning, her husband finally stopped hiding the truth. He admitted that what she had seen that day wasn't a rubber glove, but a human hand. Juran instantly broke down, demanding to know if that corpse was Suman's. Upon receiving his confirmation, Juran broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. She screamed at him, "How could you? How could you kill someone?" Meanwhile, Jack returned home after seeing the news about Suman's body being found. Jae-ho angrily accused his son of tearing the family apart. Jack confessed, "I killed Suman." That day, Suman, wearing a borrowed uniform, approached Jack. Jack thought he'd met his destiny, but Suman had other intentions. Later, she came to Jack's house under the pretense of borrowing documents. Seeing the happy family photo on the table, she deliberately smashed it. Jack, hearing the noise and rushing over, not only didn't blame her but helped clean up. Suman then sat by the window and started taking photos. Seeing her demeanor, Jack worriedly urged her to come down, but Jack shrugged it off, saying it was no big deal at worst. It was just death. He asked Suman why she'd say such a thing. Suman replied that someone once asked her if she should have never been born. Hearing this, Jack, who was tidying up, felt a pang in his heart. He then said that statement was truly cruel. Who had the right to casually utter such words? Unexpectedly, Suman responded with a wicked smile. She walked up to Jack and said, "Your father said that." Jack froze upon hearing this. He asked Suman how she knew his father. Instead of answering, Suman pulled out a pregnancy test. She explained that 2 lines meant she was pregnant. Jack demanded why she was showing him this, but Suman replied, "Your mother was beautiful, but it doesn't matter. I still won." With that, she turned to leave, leaving Jack standing there in a daze, determined to uncover the truth. Jack immediately chased after her. In a moment of impulse, he shoved Suman down the stairs. Soon, Suman lay bleeding on the floor, unconscious. Just as Jack was panicking, his mother sent a text. Juran told her son she was at her mother's house and would be back late. Shortly after, Jae-ho returned home first. He glanced at the girl lying in a pool of blood and asked his son what had happened. Before his son could speak, he dragged the girl into his bedroom and hid her inside the wardrobe. Upon learning the truth, Juran demanded to know if the child in Suman's womb was her husband's. Jae-ho dismissed it as the child's deliberate revenge, claiming she was lying. He had discovered several hospital friends involved in illicit dealings. He insisted he'd only met her once in the parking lot. After sorting through her thoughts, Juran declared she would take their son to the police station to turn himself in. Unexpectedly, her husband fiercely opposed this. He tried to persuade his wife, citing their son's young age of 15, but as a mother, she knew exactly what kind of child her son was. She refused to let him live the rest of his life burdened by guilt. Seeing this tactic wouldn't sway his wife, Jae-ho abandoned pretense. He declared he was the head of this household and thus responsible for protecting his family. He couldn't drag their son to the police station and accuse him of murder. If that happened, everything he'd worked so hard to build would be destroyed. From then on, their family would live under constant public scrutiny. He begged Juran to pretend she knew nothing, insisting they could still remain a family. But before Juran could respond, the police station called. At the same time, Yeonjin also received a call from the police. When Juran and her husband arrived at the station, they unexpectedly ran into Yeonjin. Before Juran was questioned, her husband confessed that the location where Suman was buried was the exact same place where Yeonjin's husband had died. That very spot had originally been revealed to him by Yeonjin's husband. Juran demanded to know why Yeonjin's husband had Suman's phone. Jae-ho suggested it might have been taken by accident when he drove him home after drinking. Juran feared Yeonjin would report this to the police, but Jae-ho was certain Yeonjin wouldn't. reasoning that without evidence, it would be pointless. Moreover, if the investigation deepened, she would be the one in the most danger, because in his view, Miho was killed by Yunjin. After saying this, Jae-ho prepared to go to work. Before leaving, he reminded Juran that no matter what, he would protect his family and urged her to cooperate fully with the investigation. Later, Juran and Yunjin were separately questioned about Sumin. True to Jae-ho's prediction, Yunjin didn't mention the phone to the police. Fortunately, her story aligned with Juran's. Neither account raised the officer's suspicions. The police informed Yunjin that her husband's death would likely be ruled a suicide. His sudden resignation, multiple pending cases, and mounting financial pressures from Dongbang all pointed in that direction. This outcome was actually not good news for Yunjin. If it was ruled a suicide, she wouldn't receive the 500 million won insurance payout. Later, the police returned Miho's belongings to Yunjin. When she came out, she found Juran waiting for her. Juran told Yunjin, "It should really be over now, right? And all our misunderstandings have been cleared up." Yunjin countered, "But wasn't Sumin's phone originally with Jae-ho? My husband merely took it." Juran immediately grew uneasy. She asked Yunjin if she'd told the police about this. Just then, Yunjin's phone rang. After hanging up, she hurriedly left. Watching Yunjin walk away, Juran unexpectedly followed. She drove her straight to the nursing home. It turned out her mother was threatening suicide again. That night, she had realized her daughter had killed Miho. So, while still lucid, she came to the nursing home alone. Now her mother was in this state, and she couldn't afford the nursing fees anymore. Not only that, but at this critical moment, the landlord also told her to move out as soon as possible. Meanwhile, Jae-ho's business was booming. He instructed his underling to stay alert and stop dwelling on strange thoughts. The underling hastily promised deep reflection. He desperately wanted to call another friend to celebrate with Jae-ho. Just then, that friend called. Unexpectedly, after hanging up, the underling received a call from the police station. Terrified, he immediately asked Jae-ho what to do. Jae-ho, however, replied coldly, "That has nothing to do with me." It seemed there was indeed an undisclosed story between him and Sumin. When Juran returned home that evening, she discovered her son had already run away. In her panic, Juran heard her female neighbor knocking on the door. She explained she was overwhelmed and asked to discuss it the next day. Unexpectedly, the neighbor mentioned it was about Jack. Soon after, the neighbor led Juran to Jack's location. Juran arrived at the house her son had rented. She asked him, "What is this place?" Jack replied, "This is where you'll live from now on." Juran approached her son, intending to reason with him. Jack then revealed the truth about that day to his mother. He had witnessed his father killing Sumin. It turned out Sumin, hidden in the closet, was not dead. Upon witnessing this, Jack immediately fled the scene in terror. But even after arriving at school, his mind couldn't find peace. So during class, he ran back home. When he returned to the room, he discovered Sumin was gone. After searching every room without finding her, he unexpectedly saw his father killing Sumin by the window. Jack, witnessing all this, collapsed in terror. Thus, the true culprit was finally exposed. Upon learning the truth, Juran couldn't help but burst into tears. No wonder she had always heard clattering noises coming from the second floor. If only she had trusted her instincts, perhaps she could have saved that child. Now, mother and son could only weep together in despair. Meanwhile, Yunjin took only her husband's phone from his belongings. After returning home, she tried unlocking it multiple times before finally succeeding. To her shock, the woman on the screen was Juran. "Crazy woman," she blurted out. She opened the phone's photo album and discovered pictures from Juran's home. These were the very photos Miho had taken that day. Yunjin suddenly seemed to grasp something. She immediately opened the backup of Sumin's phone album. Sure enough, she found an identical photo inside. This meant Sumin must have visited Juran's house. Recalling the notebook Miho kept before his death, it read, "Is this really a sex transaction?" Yunjin now sensed she'd uncovered a colossal secret. That's why Miho changed the amount to 500 million won. With that 500 million won, she wouldn't have to endure this miserable life. She immediately followed the address to Juran's house. Juran had brought her son's belongings to her mother's house. After discovering the secret in her husband's phone, Yunjin also went to Juran's residence. following the photos stored in the phone. She meticulously explored Juran's villa, just as her husband had done before his death, from the lawn to the backyard burial site, then to Juran's son's room. Yunjin finally identified the location where the photo from Suman's phone had been taken. She flipped her phone and snapped a photo. It matched Suman's perfectly. This proved beyond doubt that Suman's death was connected to Jae-ho. That's precisely why she dared to confront them so boldly. After touring the entire place, Juran was waiting for her. Juran invited Yunjin in for tea, saying her actions mirrored the late Miho's exactly. But Yunjin countered, "Since you opened the door for me, I assumed you wanted me to come in." Juran replied, "I received your text message sent at dawn." It turned out Yunjin had forwarded the threatening message to Juran, not Jae-ho. After all, she felt she and Juran had shared a few days of acquaintance. Juran expressed gratitude that Yunjin had come to her, then instructed her to open the bag in front of her. When Yunjin opened it, it contained a full 200 million won, but this amount wasn't what Yunjin had expected. She had clearly agreed on 500 million won. Unexpectedly, Juran said, "I know the remaining 300 million won will be given to you after the matter is settled." At this moment, Yunjin had no idea what Juran was referring to, and it was then that Juran revealed her demand that she wanted to kill her husband. It turned out that after Juran had dropped Yunjin off at the nursing home that day, Miho's belongings had been left in her car, so Juran had brought the box, intending to return these items to Yunjin. But unexpectedly, Yunjin wasn't there. Instead, she encountered Yunjin's mother. That's how she learned from Yunjin's mother about Yunjin killing her own husband. Juran asked her why she had done such a thing. Yunjin didn't answer, instead claiming her mother was senile and talking nonsense. Unexpectedly, Juran said, "Want me to dig it up?" She told Yunjin, "You should know what kind of man my husband is. Once he decides to reopen Miho's case, or if he doesn't, turning you into a murderer would be no trouble at all." Hearing this, Yunjin panicked. After finishing her tea, Yunjin composed herself and said, "What you're doing now is incitement to murder. This conversation alone is enough to constitute a crime, so you'd better not mention it in front of me again." Juran countered, "I don't think we're any different. On the contrary, I believe only you would understand my proposal." She then asked Yunjin for help once more. Yunjin had thought people living in mansions might be special, but it turned out they were all the same, so she asked Juran for some time to consider. After leaving Juran's house, Yunjin headed to the nursing home. The exorbitant fees were already overwhelming her. Unexpectedly, she then received a call from her sister-in-law. It turned out her brother had hit someone while drunk driving. As a result, the 200 million won she'd just received went straight to her brother. Later, her mother, now sober, decided to cut ties with Yunjin. She didn't want her daughter constantly handling her affairs. Instead, she urged Yunjin to have the baby and live her own life. After she passed away, Yunjin could come visit once. After leaving her mother, Yunjin resolved to start anew. But unexpectedly, Juran showed up again. This time, she brought Yunjin her favorite strawberry ice cream. The scene felt eerily familiar, only this time it was about plotting her husband's murder. Upon learning Juran was determined to act, Yunjin produced the camera and recorded their entire conversation. Confident she would receive the money, Yunjin revealed her plan. First, she instructed Juran to deliberately show her husband's abusive side to the female neighbor. Then, she told the neighbor about his suspicious behavior. Next, she arranged for evidence of her husband purchasing quick-burning charcoal. Then, she had Juran use her husband's phone to send her self-incriminating messages. Juran followed Yunjin's instructions to the letter. After completing these steps, Yunjin ordered Juran to immediately delete all records. The final phase of the plan involved drugging Jae-ho with sleeping pills and staging his death to look like a suicide. Yet on the day the plan was executed, a massive twist unfolded. It turned out Juran had previously confided in her husband about Yunjin's threats. She revealed Yunjin knew about Jack's crimes. To protect their son, she resolved to conceal this secret, exactly as her husband wished. While Jae-ho was digging the pit in the backyard again, Yunjin suddenly regained consciousness. Juran secretly slipped her a sharp knife. Just then, Jae-ho returned from digging. Yunjin, terrified, immediately closed her eyes. He asked Juran how the woman looked. Juran replied she still seemed unconscious. Jae-ho told Juran not to feel guilty about that woman and prepared to return to digging. Unexpectedly, Juran suddenly asked her husband, "Did you really have to kill Sumin back then?" Jae-ho and Yeonjin both froze upon hearing this. Faced with Juran's question, her husband naturally denied it. He even retorted, "Why are you pinning my son's crime on me?" But Juran insisted it was her husband who committed the murder. She even detailed the entire sequence of his actions. Even with her words laid bare like this, her husband still dared not admit it. So Juran revealed what her son had confided in her. Jae-ho never imagined his son would spill the secret. He felt like a complete fool, completely duped by both mother and son. Juran demanded her husband apologize for framing their son. Jae-ho instead declared he would kill Yeonjin to vent his rage. Juran could scarcely believe this was the man she'd shared a bed with for years. She couldn't understand why he'd treat their son that way. Back then, Jack had been ready to take responsibility for his actions, but as his father, he'd intervene to stop him. Because of that, their son had lived in constant torment. Jae-ho countered that Jack never truly intended to take responsibility, he simply lacked the courage to kill with his own hands. At that moment, Juran was utterly speechless. She confronted her husband, "Even a 15-year-old knows what he did wrong. Why are you the only one who doesn't?" Jae-ho replied, "If I told you the truth, you'd leave me, because every time you see me, you wouldn't just remember that dead child, you'd also see me as the murderer who killed your sister. Right? But if Jack is the killer, it's different. Even you would inevitably change your principles." Juran disagreed vehemently, and this gradually wore down her husband's patience. He ordered Juran to step aside, insisting there was no time for an argument now. That woman might wake up at any moment. But the moment the words left his mouth, Jae-ho saw Yeonjin stir slightly. He rushed over to check on her, only to be slashed by Yeonjin. Jae-ho lashed out at the pregnant Yeonjin, beating her viciously. As Yeonjin lay dying, Juran screamed at her husband to stop. Juran gave her husband one last chance to turn himself in, but Jae-ho refused to listen. Juran then told him to leave her and Jack alone. Hearing this, Jae-ho flew into a rage. He slowly approached Juran and delivered a resounding slap across her face. Thus, Juran was cornered by her husband. At that moment, Yeonjin was spotted by the female neighbor next door. Meanwhile, Jae-ho bitterly declared that Juran wasn't indispensable as the mistress of this courtyard or Jack's mother. He then violently clamped his hands around Juran's neck. Just then, the doorbell suddenly rang. Jae-ho immediately covered Juran's mouth in panic. The gravely injured Yeonjin attempted to save herself. Seeing no response after a long wait, the neighbor dialed 911. Juran was now on the verge of suffocation. Yeonjin summoned every ounce of strength to smash the glass pane before her. At the sound of shattering glass, Jae-ho finally released his grip on Juran. He intended to decide how to deal with Yeonjin, but unexpectedly, Juran suddenly rose from behind him. Juran ultimately disposed of her husband in the manner of a son. Soon, Juran was taken to the police station for questioning. She recounted everything from discovering the foul odor in the yard to the events that unfolded. The only discrepancy in her account was attributing Miho's death to her husband. News of this soon reached Yeonjin. She hadn't anticipated Juran taking such action. The female officer apologized for having previously suspected her. Returning home afterward, Yeonjin prepared a lavish lunch for herself. Just then, she received a call from her insurance agent. Since it was now confirmed her husband hadn't committed suicide, she would receive the 500 million won insurance payout. After hanging up, Yeonjin experienced her first wave of morning sickness. Returning from the bathroom, she felt the baby move for the very first time. In that moment, tears streamed down Yeonjin's face. Perhaps she finally felt a sense of relief. Sensing her mother's emotions, the fetus became more active. Later, Juran faced sentencing for her husband's murder. She confessed to everything without hesitation. Only now did she realize, what she truly wanted to protect wasn't her family, but the very unease she'd longed to escape. After leaving the courtroom, Juran unexpectedly encountered Yeonjin again. In truth, Yeonjin had visited her earlier, posing as a friend. At that time, Yeonjin confronted Juran, demanding to know if she had planned all along to eliminate both herself and Jae-ho in one fell swoop. But why had she placed the knife in her own hands? Juran didn't deny it. Instead, She countered. Then why did you decide to help me? Those 500 million won couldn't have been your only motivation, right? Truthfully, she was grateful for that chance encounter with Yunjin at the funeral home. Had Yunjin not appeared, she might have chosen to shut herself off forever, eventually becoming someone who saw nothing and felt nothing. But now, she could finally see herself. Years passed. Her mother, suffering from dementia, suddenly received photos Yunjin had sent. The Yunjin of today had started a new chapter in life with her son, and she regularly made donations in her son's name. Meanwhile, Juran, released from prison, had returned to that house with the garden.